History is filled with great rivalries. Tesla versus Edison, Gates versus Jobs, Speke versus Burton. That's right, in the mid-1800s, two men decided to risk their lives exploring East Africa to find the source of the Nile River. At the time, this was the great geographical mystery. The two men who dared to answer this mystery would go down in infamy. Meet Sir Richard Francis Burton, polyglot, speaker of 25 languages, master of disguises, and honestly, master of getting himself into trouble. And John Hanning Speke, patriotic English gentleman, big on hunting, big on empire, and very big on wanting all the credit. They start as teammates, they end as mortal rivals.
In 1854, the Royal Geographical Society sent Burton to map East Africa. Burton, at this point, had already gained a reputation as one of the boldest adventurers of his age by disguising himself as an Afghan Muslim and joining the pilgrimage to Mecca, a daring expedition, which meant certain death if caught. Burton would be joined by William Strawyan, a man named Hearn, and John Hanning Speke, whose application to the journey was accepted due to his previous experience in harsh environments, having explored the Himalayas while on leave from the Bengal Army. At the start of the expedition, the party split, with Speke venturing to Wadi Norgal and Burton heading to Harar, where he would once again don a disguise and take on the identity of Haji Mirza Abdullah. Burton spent 10 days in Harar exploring and investigating local landmarks, before meeting back up with Speke in Aden. When Burton learned that a local guide had cheated Speke, he had the guide imprisoned, an act that soured relations with locals. Things go south fast. In Berbera, their camp gets ambushed by 200 Somali warriors. Burton gets a javelin through both cheeks, a wound that produced one vicious scar. Speke, captured, tied up, stabbed a bunch of times, somehow punches a guy while tied, escapes into the night, and runs until he finds Burton. Oh, and their mate Strawyan? KIA. Only Hearn escaped unscathed, and the whole trip was financially ruined. Burton believed Speke had retreated in the chaos. Speke resented the implication that he was a coward. The memory of Berbera would shadow their partnership, and when the chance came to explore the Nile, the wounds of Somalia had not yet healed.
By 1857, Burton is cleared of blame and back in the game. New mission, find the source of the Nile. They set up from Zanzibar with a caravan that looks like a moving city. Porters, donkeys, supplies, the works. The journey was brutal. The East African terrain was unforgiving. Dense jungle, sweltering heat, flooded plains, and the ever-present threat of disease. Burton himself was struck by a horrific fever, so severe that he sometimes had to be carried on a stretcher, unable to walk. Illness did not spare Speke either, who at this point was dealing with temporary, partial blindness. Still, in February 1858, they achieved a breakthrough. They became the first Europeans to reach Lake Tanganyika. But the victory was bittersweet. Burton, too sick to continue, watched helplessly from the shore while Speke set out in small dugout canoes. What followed bordered on the absurd. During this solo venture, Speke was stranded on an island, half-blind, feverish, and in agony after a beetle crawled into his ear. In desperation, he jabbed at it with either a knife or a pen, leaving himself temporarily deaf. Now he's half-blind and half-deaf. Good times. Rumours begin to reach the crew of another big lake to the northeast. Burton is bedridden. Speke decides to push forward. Taking 34 men with the trusted guides Sidi Mubarak Bombay and Mabruki as captains, Speke continued the expedition. After 47 grueling days, half-blind, half-deaf, but fully stubborn, Speke reaches a vast, glimmering body of water, the locals called Namlolwe, Nalabale, or Ukarewe. In true Victorian fashion, he named it for his queen, Lake Victoria. Problem, he saw just a fraction of it, didn't have the right equipment, and didn't actually trace the Nile from start to finish. The expedition had lost much of its survey equipment, leaving him unable to chart the true size or full geography of the lake. His vision was still impaired, and he saw only a fraction of its southern shore, his view blocked by islands.
Using boiling point experiments, he estimated the lake's elevation at about 4,000 feet, higher than Tanganyika. For Speke, this was enough evidence to convince him that Lake Victoria was the answer, the source of the Nile. Burton was weary of such a proclamation. Burton valued meticulous observation and scientific proof, refusing to make sweeping claims without hard evidence. Speke, frustrated by Burton's caution, believed bold declarations were necessary to seize glory before rivals could. Returning to London in 1859, Burton expected to present their findings jointly, but Speke stunned him. He rushed ahead, announcing to the Royal Geographical Society that Lake Victoria was the source of the Nile. This move would fully collapse their partnership into open rivalry.
Lake Victoria, the undeniable source of the Nile.
Burton and Speke were opposites in almost every way. Burton, eccentric, scandalous, smarter than everyone but very hard to like. Speke, conservative, patriotic, popular with the boys, not as brainy, but way more relatable. The press loves the drama. Victorian society treasures its explorers, and the dispute over the Nile source became more than geography. It became a high-stakes theatre. Burton gave scathing private remarks about Speke's intellect, once describing him as incapable of taking care of himself in the field. Speke, in turn, hinted that Burton was too enamoured with foreign cultures, too, quote, un-English, unquote, in his sympathies. Their clash became not just about the Nile, but about identity, cosmopolitan outsider versus patriotic insider. At the RGS, the split was visible. The leadership championed Speke, seeing in him a man who embodied Victorian virtues of courage and loyalty to empire. Burton, though brilliant, was harder to control as he questioned authority, broke taboos, and made enemies as easily as friends. For the establishment, Speke was safer to support. Ultimately, the RGS backed Speke for a second expedition, this time with James Grant as his companion, not Burton. Speke reached Lake Victoria again and confirmed its vast size. He traced a river flowing northward from it, which he believed was the White Nile. But crucially, he did not follow it the whole way to Egypt. His claim was still incomplete, and Burton never let him forget it. By 1864, tensions boil over. A public debate between Burton and Speke is scheduled. Finally, they'll settle it in front of everyone. The night before, Speke goes hunting. A gun goes off. He's out for the count. Officially, it was deemed an accident. Unofficially, whispers that Speke offed himself spread through London, a rumour theorised to be pushed by Burton. It would be Speke with whom history credits with discovering the Nile source, though later expeditions would ultimately have to provide the proof. Additional credit also needs to be given to the hundreds of native porters and guides that were indispensable. In the age of colonialism, they are too often forgotten in the background of the story. Burton's legacy lay elsewhere, in his extraordinary translations, his cultural studies, and even his wife's burning of many of his writings after his death. But the scar of his rivalry with Speke never fully healed. Together, they had endured ambushes, disease, and betrayal in their quest for the Nile. Yet it was not the dangers of Africa that destroyed them. It was their own pride, ambition, and mistrust.
Many thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.